Hey, I'm Rich Gibbons here, Executive Director for Southwest MLS, and today I'm going to go over some of the NAR Settlement FAQs. So this is in addition to my last video, which I'm going to link down in the description, which goes over the settlement itself in a little more detail, but what I want to cover here is a lot of the frequently asked questions we're getting. So a couple of housekeeping things. Down in the description, there's going to be a timestamp link to each of the questions, so if there's a specific question you want to jump to, you can get straight to that. There's also going to be quite a few resources linked down below. So like I said, my last video will be in there. I'm going to talk about a couple different websites going to be useful for you. So make sure you're expanding that description and looking at what's in there for you. So of course, the number one question we're getting as far as the FAQ, as far as the settlement goes, is what's going on? You know, everybody feels like the dog burning in the house here with that meme, but I want everybody to kind of take a breath and be this dog instead. So I'm going to just kind of real briefly cover what's happening right here, and then we'll get into some of those FAQs as well. So the settlement is a $418 million, has to be paid over 4 years. Over 1 million NAR members are cleared from liability with this settlement. And it does also clear all realtor-owned association and MLSs from liability as well. As far as the members that are not covered, it's either because they were a part of a different settlement, or if they're non-realtors, then they may have some other issues there as well. But even, you know, there's a couple of the brokerages that are above that 2 billion mark. Like there's any brokerage that had more than $2 billion in transaction in 2022 is not covered. But even a lot of the members of those brokerages still are under this. So if you have questions about whether you're covered or not, speak with legal counsel. But the biggest part of this is that NAR is not admitting fault. They are not admitting that there was any kind of problem with the cooperative compensation rule. We still firmly believe that we were doing the right thing, but based on reasons I'm going to discuss later, this settlement was the best way forward for everybody. Now, the two practice changes that are coming out of this is that cooperative compensation can no longer be communicated via the MLS, and that buyer representation agreements must be signed before touring a home. Now, I know you have questions on that, but this is an FAQ video, so we'll get to those questions in just a second. But one of the first things I want to say is just right off the bat, you have these two websites, facts.realtor and competition.realtor. Facts.realtor has the settlement facts, which is like a 4-page summary of the settlement. It has a bunch of FAQs, a lot of which I'm putting into this video for you today. It has a finance FAQ in there that's what we'll talk about a little bit later, and then it also has the settlement itself. So you can see all that for yourself and get it straight from the source rather than relying on pontificators on the internet or even myself doing it for you. And then, of course, like I said before, make sure you're checking the description below for a lot more links and information for you. All right, so first FAQ. The news said cooperative compensation is dead. What's going on there? So that's just bad reporting, to be quite frank about it. Cooperative compensation is not going away. It just can no longer be communicated via the MLS. So cooperative compensation can still be negotiated off of the MLS. And there's some other ways that it can still be communicated we're going to talk about in a bit. But bottom line is how a realtor gets paid is changing. If a realtor gets paid is not changing. Realtors still provide massive value for consumers navigating the most complicated transaction of their lives, and they will still be able to be compensated for that. So those things are not changing. Got to be very clear there. Cooperative compensation is not going away, and consumers still can take advantage of those massive benefits. So then the next question becomes, well, what is NAR and GAAR doing about inaccurate reporting? The best we can is the answer. So on Friday, when this news dropped, GAAR passed on the news release along with information from NAR that conveyed the accurate information, refuting what CNN and the New York Times had put out earlier that day. We held a press conference, which had a decent attendance at it. And there's one news station in the area who chose to completely ignore both of those things and produce inaccurate information anyways. Same thing is happening at the NAR level. NAR has a crisis communication team that's been retained, and they are working feverishly to get information out to the media. But if the media chooses not to pick up that information, there's not much that we can do about it. There's actually a really interesting psychological effect, I don't remember exactly what it's called right now, where when you see something in the news that you know about and you realize how bad the reporting is on it, it kind of makes you realize what else is being said out there. So just kind of keep that in mind. GAAR and NAR are both working very hard to inform the media as much as we can. There's been a couple good articles as well. The Albuquerque Business Journal put out a really good one. And then there's some others coming out as well that are a lot more friendly, that are at reporting accurate information. So we are working on it. We'd appreciate your help on that, and make sure you're getting the right information out to your consumers and friends and family as well. So the next thing that happens is, okay, well, what if we, guys, I've heard them all. What if we put compensation in documents? What if we put compensation in showing time? What if we utilize capital letters in a creative way in public or private remarks? We've all seen the meme. I've seen it. Guys, first off, no. The answer to all these is no. The second off is please stop. Trying to find creative ways to keep things the way they are is a waste of all of your time and energy. Things are changing. It's time to accept that, time to grieve that, and then it's time to move on. And I'm going to talk a lot more about what should I do now later. But right now, guys, cooperative compensation can no longer be communicated via the MLS. There's a couple caveats to that I'll talk about in a bit. But just stop. The creative ways to keep things the way they are isn't going to help anybody right now. And there will end up being rules about it. So just stop. Next up, okay, how can we communicate cooperative compensation? So there's a couple different ways in the settlement statement, which I'll let you go read yourself, but one of the examples is that a brokerage can have cooperative compensation on their own website for their own listings. So one thing I've seen floating around is that certain popular portals out there are just going to be able to host all the compensation for everybody, but no, they can't. They can only do it for their own listings. That's a very key part of the statement that the settlement makes very, very clear. So anything you hear about that is just false. So that's one place that is carved out entirely in the settlement. The settlement also makes it clear that MLSs are still allowed to communicate seller concessions. Now there's a little bit of some unknowns there. Which is where I'm actually going to go talk. I'm going to kind of jump into that. I'm going to talk about a couple of the unknowns here. So the settlement says that seller concessions are allowed to be communicated in the MLS, but what exactly is a seller concession? That's not something that the settlement makes very clear right now. It's paragraph 58, section 13 that has this exclusion that allows seller concessions, but there's still a lot of questions and interpretations out there about what that looks like. So that's one of our unknowns. That's a question we're asking as well. And one of the things that NAR and the various trade organizations need to work out. Some other big questions. What about VA buyers? I hear that one a lot. It's probably the second thing out of most people's mouths. What about first-time home buyers? One of the things I will say here is on facts.realtor, NAR did just put out a financing FAQ that's really interesting to read through. That kind of answers some of these questions, but what it boils down to is that NAR is working hard with Fannie, Freddie, and HUD to work on these different financing programs to see what kind of what kind of things they can change and work on this. But I mean, bottom line is there's a lot of work being done on this. There's a lot of questions on it. We have the same questions. And that's what everybody's working feverishly on getting answers to. What is going to happen to forms? I mean, I think just off the top of our heads, we can probably think of 5 or 6 forms that might need to change because of the settlement. That is entirely on NMAR. And NMAR has a forms committee. They have Ashley Strauss-Martin. I've said publicly many times, I think Ashley Strauss-Martin is one of the smartest people in the state of New Mexico, and I'm sure she probably hasn't been sleeping very much since Friday because she's probably working on what these different forms are going to look like. So that's another. It is an unknown right now, but there are people working on it. We can't have all the answers right off the bat when all of us heard about this at 7:30 a.m. on Friday. Another open question right now, what about open houses? What about sign calls? I mentioned earlier that part of the settlement says you have to have a buyer representation agreement signed before touring a home. What about sign calls? What about open houses? That creates a gray area there, right? Again, we don't know the answers to these questions right now. But what I will say is this. The reason that you are a member of a trade association is so that the trade association can worry about these questions. It's going to be up to NAR, NMAR, GAAR, Southwest MLS, your board of directors and committees at every one of these levels to get together and answer these questions. As a matter of fact, I know that I can't remember the whole name. It's the Emerging Trends and Technology Advisory Board. I think I got that right. That is a kind of a subcommittee of NAR's MLS committee, and that committee is meeting in a week and a half. They've already got a meeting on the books. People that are on the committee are buying flights as we speak to all get together and kind of hash these questions out. And then from there, that information is going to go to the NAR MLS committee, and then the MLS committee is going to go to the board of directors. And, but these kind of things are why these trade associations exist, because we can worry about dealing with this on your behalf, and you can just go out there and sell real estate. And again, I'm going to cover what should I do now a little bit later, but know that these are questions we are asking as well. None of these are new to us. These are all things we all thought about on Friday as well. So let's get back into some answers we do know. Is why did NAR settle? So I know there was a lot of people out there who were saying that NAR should just keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. And NAR was talking about the possibility of an appeal. And frankly, they still felt like they had a strong case on appeal. But the problem with an appeal is you have to be able to post a bond. That would have been a $5.6 billion bond. And NAR is saying this publicly. This is not anything new. As a matter of fact, if you watch Kevin Sears' video that went out on the 21st, he talks about it in there, which, by the way, highly recommend watching those videos from Kevin Sears. They have been great. But a $5.6 million bond would have bankrupted NAR. And NAR could have filed Chapter 11, and they could have done that and avoided the liability of this. But it would have left all of us in the lurches if they did that. Associations, MLSs, brokerages, and members across the country would have been left to our own devices to try to fight these cases. So NAR did not file Chapter 11 and did not file bankruptcy, so they could come in and that means they couldn't do the appeal. So that's where they ended up on this. And then the other part of this I want to say is guys, realtors know this better than anybody. Anytime you're going to make a transaction work, anytime you have a settlement, each side wins some and loses some, right? That's the way negotiation works. So don't focus so hard on just what NAR lost in this settlement. Don't forget to think about what could have happened if NAR didn't settle. First off, the damages for this were estimated somewhere in the $700 billion range for nationwide. To get that down to $418 million, that's a win in and of itself. I mean, getting rid of cooperative compensation entirely instead of just saying it can't be in the MLS is something that could have happened. There's a lot of worst case scenarios that would be a whole lot worse than this, that you got to keep that perspective when you're thinking about a settlement. Again, both sides have to come together, which means both sides win some and both sides lose some. And again, realtors know this better than anybody. You guys do this every single day to get transactions to close. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through these settlements. So, this was the best way forward for the industry. We make some practice changes. NAR pays a bill to the lawyers that did this. But we're able to still keep serving consumers because, again, cooperative compensation is not going away. It just can't be communicated in the MLS. So you are still able to provide that massive value to consumers, which is incredibly important for NAR to protect because we are such a pro-consumer industry. All right, next up. During the lawsuit process, why didn't NAR try blank? And this is things like, why didn't NAR talk about how important we are to buyers, or just a lot of things that that have been going on during this court case process. And guys, this court case has been going on since April of 2019 is where it first started. And for those of us who've been following along with the case, we can tell you NAR tried everything possible. There's a lot of legal reasons why NAR either could or couldn't submit certain arguments. I don't really want to get into that in a video, but if anybody really wants to nerd out on it, just give me a call and we can kind of talk through it some. Short version is it has to do with per se versus rule of reason, if you really want to dig into that. But NAR truly did try everything. They had expert witnesses on the stand. They had economists and statisticians to refute the information from the plaintiffs' economists and statisticians. They truly did try everything in this court case, and just unfortunately, it didn't swing our way. Anybody who is involved in the law will tell you that even if the law is entirely on your side, you still lose 25% of cases. And that's not a hard number, by the way. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, but you can still lose. And unfortunately, that's what happened in this case. So we had to move to a settlement in order to have the best options moving forward for everybody. So that brings us to other questions like, why should I still be a member of NAR? So first off, I mentioned earlier that NAR did not file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which would have got them out of this, but left the rest of us in the lurch, right? It wasn't the right thing to do. They didn't do that. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. Within this settlement, there's actually an out for if someone's like a non-realtor MLS or they're not a member of NAR. That allows them to settle this at a level that is digestible. If Southwest MLS was not a member of NAR, which we are, we could have paid about half $500,000 bill and be able to be settled under this, even though we weren't a member of NAR. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's NAR truly did what was best for the industry in this case, and that's always their thought process moving forward. And then the other thing I always say with NAR is there's a website. It's nar.realtor/advocacy, and when you get to that page, if you click on all federal issues, there'll be a whole bunch of issues that pop up. And what I challenge anybody to do who's asking if they should be a member of NAR is go to that page, open up all federal issues, and I just want you to pick 3 at random. And I want you to read through that issue, and I want you to consider what your business would look like if NAR was not winning on that front. Some of my personal favorites are 1099 versus W-2. There's a carve out in the independent contractor portion of the IRS tax code that allows real estate agents to be 1099 contractors. So think about what your business would look like if that wasn't true. The flood insurance program, National Flood Insurance Program. Every single year when the politicians get up there and they're fighting over funding the government, this is always something that comes up, and NAR has to fight every single time. Be like, guys, literally, you cannot let this lapse even for one day, because if you let this lapse for one day, you're going to harm a very high number of ongoing transactions. That's something that they fight for every single day. And then also, don't forget that during the pandemic, NAR fought for realtors to be considered essential employees, so that real estate could continue to be transacted. These are all things that NAR has done at the federal advocacy level, that they fight for every single day. And then right now, as we speak, they're having conversations with Fannie and Freddie and HUD and all these different organizations that manage all these different loan programs, fighting for you to be able to, either roll that cooperative compensation into these loans to be considered a closing cost or just whatever they come up with. They're fighting for you in this. So dues right now are $201 a year for NAR. I think that is pennies on the dollar for the advocacy that you get in exchange for that. So along those lines, are my dues going to increase now? This is a big question I've seen a lot. And NAR has said publicly that that there is no plans to raise dues in 2024 or 2025 in relation to this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this $418 million is being paid over 4 years. The only thing that has to be paid within the first year is $197. And then I think it's something like $72 million a year after that until it's paid out. So there is no current plans to increase dues because of this. And again, that's something NAR has said publicly. I'm not sharing any insider information on this. So no, there are no plans for that to increase right now because this is a digestible settlement for NAR. And then, so why should I still be a member of GAAR? So same deal, GAAR fights at the local level. Every single year there's things like transfer taxes. There's things like rent control. There's a lot of different things that go through the legislature that try to do things that are going to impact your business. So advocacy is a big piece of what happens here. Things like super lockboxes. That is an association benefit. As a member of GAAR, you're also a member of the New Mexico Association of Realtors, which gives you access to your forms and transaction desk and SkySlope. So really, like for the NAR question, the GAAR question, and then I'm about to cover MLS in a second, I actually did a video called "What Does My Association Do for Me?" I'm going to link that in the description for you as well. That goes into all of the different benefits that exist between NAR, NMAR, GAAR, and Southwest MLS. So highly recommend you check out that video. It goes over all the different benefits that are available to you as being members of these organizations, and I think you'll find that it is well worth the money that you spend here. And then finally, I want to talk about what does this do to the value of the MLS. And this is talking more high level. I mean, Southwest MLS, like I said, go check out that video. We have a lot of products and services that help you specifically here. But I want to talk about the MLS as more of a big picture. A lot of people believed for a long time that compensation was just this foundation of the MLS. But really, I want you to take a step back because it's a lot more than that. And if any of you have heard me talk for the last, 3 years that I've been here, you could probably skip ahead because you've heard this before. Compensation is a field in the MLS that gives you a number. That's literally all it is. The value of the MLS is aggregation, compliance, and syndication. So aggregation, we bring all the data together into one place and create a central source of truth where you can go to one place and see a complete picture of the inventory on the market. And as we move into the future, we're looking at bringing in more sources. You guys have seen we launched Rental Beast recently, and we brought in a lot of data from non-members to bring more rental data into the MLS. We're bringing on a product here pretty soon called Builders Update, and at some point, that's going to bring a lot of new construction data into the MLS. So we're working on aggregating these different sources of data into one comprehensive data set for you to help you do your job easier. Compliance. The real beauty of an MLS, like in our case, we have 4,500 people who have agreed to abide by the same rule set. So that is extremely powerful. Again, and I know this is repetitive for people who've heard my videos before, but if you go overseas, you go outside of the U.S. and Canada, the way they work is there's multiple different websites you have to go to first off because there is no central source of truth. Those websites charge per listing per month for a real estate agent to put their listing up there, but then they don't have compliance because they're actually incentivized to not have listings taken down when they sell because and then the agent is incentivized because if that listing is still generating good leads, and they're going to leave it up. So on these websites overseas, you have hundreds of listings that aren't even available as active inventory. So that's just one example of some of the value of that compliance piece of the MLS. And then, of course, syndication. You give us your phone number and email, and then you can upload your headshot and flex, and you give us your listings, and all that information is syndicated to about 700 to 800 websites across the internet. So you have one entry point to get a broad range of advertising. So that's the value of the MLS. Aggregation, compliance, syndication. So the value of the MLS has not changed. So that's the value proposition of the MLS and why it's important. So let's now get down to what do I do now? So the first thing I want to talk about is, of course, look to official sources for information, guys. Look to NAR, GAAR, Southwest MLS, these videos, look at your GAAR blogs. We're putting out a lot of information for you. There's actually a GAAR blog that I'll link down below here that has every single blog and video we've sent out all in one place about these lawsuits. I'm going to warn you, it's a lot because it's been 4 or 5 years worth of information going out. But we have put out an absolute ton of information for you, and we really want to be your primary source of getting that good information out. I talked about facts.realtor. Again, that has your settlement facts, that has your FAQs. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, hey, we want talking points for our consumers. Guys, that's what it is. The settlement facts and the FAQs, those are your talking points for your consumers. Speaking of talking points for consumers, there's also competition.realtor. On competition.realtor, there's 2 really good resources. There's 179 ways realtors are worth every penny, and then there's another 105 ways realtors are worth every penny that focuses on the buying side. That's 2 really good documents to start with for talking about your value proposition. I also want to point out that NAR has made the accredited buyer representative designation free for all members. If you go to become.abr.realtor, there are live virtual courses you can sign up for, and they have all the different instructors signed up there, so pick your favorite instructor. And then there's also a self-led online course you can take anytime you want. You want to do it 2 o'clock in the morning, go for it. But you can get that ABR designation for free that gives you the accredited buyer representative designation to help work with buyers. Another designation I want to point out that I feel like is going to be important moving forward is real estate negotiation expert. Negotiation skills are going to be extremely important. They've always been very important, but now they're going to be like table stakes. Like, this is just a bare bones minimum of what you need to know to operate in this business, because you're now negotiating your buyer representation agreements before even touring a home and negotiating the transaction itself. Anybody who works in real estate knows that getting to the offer is not the hard part. Getting the offer to the finish line is really the hard part, but negotiation is important in both of those factors. The other thing is, these are things you should be talking to your qualifying broker about. There's 4 things here. Using buyer broker agreements, because they're now going to be required as part of the settlement here. What is your value proposition? A key part of business. You go to any business school, the first thing you learn is, how do you differentiate yourself from your competitors? What makes you valuable? One of the statements that I've seen that I really like recently is, explain the complexity but sell the simplicity, right? You really want to make sure that the consumer understands exactly how complex this process is, because it is very complex. But then the part you sell is how you make it simplistic, right? So again, talk with your qualifying broker about that and have a strategy of what your value proposition looks like, which leads into, how do you communicate that value to consumers? How are you advertising that value? How are you having the conversation with your consumer? What are your talking points? What are your scripts? All those different things. Be having that conversation with your qualifying broker, what that looks like. And then the 4th thing is just, how do you treat your business like a business? This is another one I've said 100 times. The realtors who treat their business like a business are actually probably going to do better in this new environment. And the ones who don't treat their business like a business are probably going to do worse. So that's another conversation you should be having with your qualifying broker. And by the way, if these 4 things sound familiar, it's because they're the same 4 things you should have already been doing. NAR has been talking about buyer broker agreements for literally decades now. Value proposition, communicating value, and treating your business like a business are all 3 things that everybody should be focusing on. Every real estate coach in the country will tell you these 3 things. So if you notice, these 4 things are the same thing you should have already been doing, the same things you should be doing now, which should communicate how little of a change this really is. Another thing I'll point out here is, commercial real estate has had this figured out for a long time, guys. I've taught, this is the way that this is moving to, is the way commercial has worked, again, for decades. So call up your favorite commercial realtor and have a conversation with them. Ask them how many deals they get paid on, because every single one I've talked to, the answer is just about all of them. So talk to your favorite commercial realtor. They probably have some tips on what this looks like, because sometimes you may not have the compensation conversation until after the offer is already submitted, which is how it already works in commercial. So the final thing I have on the what do I do now is 3 things: adapt, innovate, serve. So adapt. Realtors, if you look through the course of history, are really incredibly adaptive to change. It's because change happens every day. You get into a deal, you think this deal is going to be smooth sailing, an inspection comes up and huge problem, right? You adapt, you change, you think, you're professional problem solvers. This is what you do, is adapting. So just continue to do that. I was talking to one, realtor has been doing this for a very long time and is an instructor now, and one of the things he said was, I've done this long enough that I've been through 12 ends of the world. And if you look back through the history of real estate, he's not wrong. The transfer from books to digital, the advent of the internet, the rise of the portals, all these different things. Realtors have been incredibly adaptive, and as long as they've always kept their North Star on serving the consumer, which is what you do, it hasn't been a problem. So be ready to adapt. Be ready to innovate. One of the comments I've made here is that a lot of real estate right now, if you look across education, advertising, different tools that are out there, there's a lot of focus on the listing side. So from this, we're going to see a lot of innovation on the buyer side now. Of course, I put in kind of fine print here, do it ethically and within the rules, of course, but innovate, get out there and compete. you know, and see what you can come up with. And then finally, again, serve, guys. Serve, serve, serve. One of the reasons I love working for realtors is because the vast majority, I'm talking 99.9% of you, have a heart for service, for serving the consumer, for helping these people through the most complicated process of their lives. And then you get that satisfaction of handing them the keys, right? How great is that? You know, that is the focus of the realtor. It always has been, it always will be, and it's how you're going to survive moving forward. So adapt, innovate, serve. Go out there and do those things. Focus on these 4 things that you should be talking to your qualifying broker about, and just thrive, guys. This I truly believe there's a lot of good in this, and I think that if you look hard enough, you'll see it as well. So don't buy into the negativity. Don't buy into the nitpicking and the back and forth. Don't buy into the, oh, you know, we have to keep things this way. Just, it's time to adapt. And honestly, we're going to come out better in the end for all of this. So, you know, overall message in this, you know, you're a member of a trade association for a reason. Yes, there are some unknown questions. We are working on those, and we're going to be communicating as much as we can. I'm sure this is not going to be my last video on this topic. And then, you know, like I was talking about, look down in the description for a lot of different resources that we're going to link for you down there. Any questions, you know, give us a call down here, 505-843-8833, and support at swmls.com. We'll be happy to answer those questions for you. And just, you know, keep your head up, guys. We got this together. Thanks. Have a great day.